Drew, talk to me about this idea of outgrowing porn and how your philosophy or approach here differs versus your traditional maybe quitting methods or even kind of the abstaining approach.
Yeah, getting free from porn is not like giving up chocolate or trying to go to the gym more. It's like breaking up with someone who's been there for you for years, probably decades for many of us. Because the truth is, for the most part, men and women don't get hooked on porn, boys and girls do. So we have to heal the boy to free the man.
Got it. Men and women don't get hooked, boys do.
Yeah, when you think about when you first encountered porn or when most people first encountered porn, that age is getting younger and younger.
Why is that such a big problem? I mean, use a great analogy chocolate, right? Kids love chocolate. They want chocolate after dessert. They would replace chocolate for dinner many times. What makes getting hooked on porn different than the chocolate analogy or another big vice or struggle that can maybe lead to some compulsive or addictive behaviors?
Yeah, pornography has been called a supernormal stimulus, which means that it's not just pleasurable, it's going above and beyond what we were created for artificially. It's like a drug. And Fight the New Drug has a great documentary about the way that pornography damages the brain and hurts relationships. It's called Brain Heart World. And that's a really great resource to just get educated about okay, why is this different than a lot of other habits? And also, why is it similar to a drug addiction or some other kind of addiction?
What are some of the similarities?
Well, it runs on the same neural pathways in terms of dopamine, serotonin. A big one with porn and any kind of sexual addiction is oxytocin, the bonding chemical, um, which is why I tend to talk about not just addiction to porn, but attachment to porn. It's a relationship. It's like a family member who has supported you and yet who was also sexually abusing you. And those kinds of relationships are really, really hard to break off, which is why so many of us are frustrated and exhausted after years of trying to quit.
Yeah. I think one of the things I hear you talk a lot about, I think you address it um, in the book, is understanding the story behind our fantasies. And I'm curious because, we're talking here and it's been our experience with guys, like you said, so many of them get introduced at a very young age. And I think porn shapes their understanding of sex, intimacy. So, what role does understanding your fantasies, understanding the types of porn that you're into, play in helping a man outgrow or get free from porn?
This is one of the most important concepts for anyone who wants lasting freedom, not just behavior change. The power of porn is in its particularity. There's no such thing as porn in general. There are only specific scenarios, particular types of people, and unique activities that create arousal. And for each of us, those are different. Could be women, men, older, younger, one on one, group. Um, for some people, their fantasies don't even involve themselves. And, and so there are all these different genres and types of porn that have power, not just because it's porn, but because there's something there. There's something that is symbolizing something deeper. And so when you get to understand the story of why this specific type of person or why this particular type of porn, it makes more sense and porn starts to lose its power.
Can you walk us through a process, right? I'm sure you have a process that you take your guys through. Is a discovery phase, specific questions, and then how we can link the fantasy or the desire or where we're getting the arousal from to specific types of hurt, types of trauma. Yeah, can we kind of unpack this a little bit here?
Yeah, definitely. Here are the questions that I would typically ask to start exploring the story behind a specific sexual fantasy. First of all, how does that fantasy make you feel? So, for example, the sexual fantasy that was always the focus of my own porn searches was for girls and women with braces and orthodontics. And I thought that was so strange. And yet it had a lot of power over me. Well, how would I feel if my fantasy with a person like that um, was coming true? When I see a certain type of image or video, how would I feel? I would feel accepted. I would feel excited. I would feel included. So you start there and ask with your specific thing that turns you on. Okay, how does it make you feel emotionally, not just physically? And then when have you felt the exact opposite? So for me, that would be when have I felt rejected instead of accepted? When have I felt bored instead of excited? When have I felt on the outside instead of included? And that takes me right back to middle school, where so many kids in my class had braces. And that's where so much of my wounding and sexual development got stunted. That's the place where all this started for me. And so, as Jay Stringer says in his book Unwanted, our fantasies can be a roadmap to healing, showing us where we need to focus our inner healing work so that we can get unstuck.
I love that. How does that particular fantasy make you feel? And then understanding the opposite. And it's you're creating this, I don't want to say spectrum of emotions, but there's a polarity there, right? And you're trying to, I guess, you find the healing through understanding the opposite.
Mm-hmm. So once I know when have I felt the opposite, now I have a trailhead to explore. Okay, what's the pain underneath this porn? What am I trying to soothe here? What am I trying to cope with? And then that story of suffering also shows me, what do I truly need? I truly need real acceptance, like real inclusion, not the sexual symbol of it.
Using a lot of acceptance and connection type of language here, and I think it was Johan Hari. I think he's the original source of the quote: "The opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but it's connection." Is every guy that's struggling with porn addiction is somewhere deep inside of there? Is he lacking connection and intimacy? Like, is every single case going to be rooted in this desire to feel connected or accepted that we're not getting in the real world?
That is always a part of it. It's not the only piece. There are a few other major pieces that we also need to deal with. And one of them is safety. So, porn provides not just the illusion of connection, but also some artificial safety because it's anonymous. Um, it's a place where I don't have to take the same kinds of risks that I would with an in person sexual experience. Porn is never going to um, insult you. Porn is never going to offend you. It's always going to show you exactly what you want. And internet porn has exactly what you want, whatever that is. And so there's a level of safety where I don't have to change, I don't have to grow, I don't have to put myself out there. Um, and so porn can symbolize safety in some really surprising ways. For example, for some men, group sex might symbolize safety from the intensity of possibly being rejected by one person. For somebody else, an individual sexual experience one on one might symbolize safety from being overlooked or ignored in a group. Um, Porn featuring women might symbolize safety for men, especially if it's women only and there are no men involved at all. Or porn featuring men only might symbolize safety from women. Um, a part of many men's arousal template is age. So older might symbolize safety from um, other peers, and then also younger might symbolize safety from adults. So safety and connection are two of the big ones. And then another big one is shame. So this really blew my mind when I started working with clients on this. They would sometimes tell me the exact type of person that they're drawn to sexually, especially in porn. And sometimes they would be describing themselves. Like, it's just wild to me. Oftentimes, the people in the porn we prefer seem to possess the qualities that we desperately desire but believe that we lack. So somebody might be super strong and they're drawn to strong athletic men, but they actually feel weak. They feel inferior. Or maybe, in my case, being drawn to a woman with a beautiful smile reflects how I feel about my own teeth, which was always very negative and very full of shame. So sometimes the sexual fantasy symbolizes the positive qualities that we feel will remove our own shame.
Yeah. So the porn becomes a mirror, so to speak, of what we're maybe internally struggling with.
Yeah, exactly. Um, it's it's a way of accessing the qualities I feel like I can never have, or the qualities that I feel like um, maybe I wish I had more of.
The safety piece jumped out to me, and where I went to almost immediately is I think it was John Eldridge's quote is porn will give a man everything that he wants or desires from a woman without requiring anything of him in return. And I'm sure this is going to lead us back to this discussion of outgrowing, healing the boy, becoming the man, right? It's like the boy is afraid to approach a woman. A man that is walking in confidence and courage is not afraid to approach.
Yeah. Or he might feel fear, like we're going to feel fear, yet courage is moving forward anyway and embracing the discomfort of the unknown. I mean, porn is so predictable. So a huge part of outgrowing it is learning to tolerate uncertainty and face the unknown. You know, like if I don't go to porn right now, how am I going to feel? What am I going to experience? What kind of pain am I exposing myself to? It's uncertain. It's unknown. If I choose to believe that I really am a man, that I really can overcome this, uh, that's going to feel like a risk. You know, whereas if I choose to believe I'll never get over this, well, there's an element of like absolute certainty there. Our brains like certainty.
Mm-hmm. And that was something we addressed. Guys, I had Drew on recently on the Rebuild Man Coach's Corner, and we had this conversation around shame. And sometimes shame becomes a place of certainty. So, how can shame play a role in keeping a guy stuck in this cycle of porn?
Yeah, it is the fuel of any addiction, that will drive me to self-soothe or self-sabotage, and then it's also the result of those behaviors. So it's really a vicious cycle, and then that's why I love you how you talk about identity transformation. That's the most powerful motivation is to know who I am, and that's why I always end every episode of my podcast saying, "Always remember, you are God's beloved son. In you, He is well pleased." It's good news.
Yeah, I think what I love about our conversations here is I think the philosophy of the rebuilt man runs parallel to healing the boy, just different language. But the ideas behind it, coming at it through maybe a few different lenses and, professional background experiences, which is why I loved having you on, for the last couple of weeks. I think we said I've talked to you more times in the last couple of weeks, and I've talked to my mom. I made a joke about that before we started recording. So using that idea of identity transformation, speak to it through the lens of your approach of outgrowing porn. Like, what are the parts of the boy that we're looking to heal? But also, I think that there's going to be this foundation, like a renewal, restoring. So, how do we accept that there's a broken part of us without holding on to this attachment of a completely broken addict? Because I'm sure that would be something that you want to make sure you instill in your guys is, even though you're struggling, God created you with some greatness. So how do you pull that out while letting go of the bad?
Yeah. Porn is not who you are. And your inner child, we do a lot of inner child work. Your inner child is not who you are. It's a part of you. And we all have these younger, emotional, vulnerable, wounded parts of us. It's really more like an inner orphanage where I've got the 3-year-old me, the 6-year-old me, the 12-year-old me, even, the 20-year-old me had some stuff that is still incomplete in my life. And so when we heal the boy, when we do inner child work, we need to be careful to remain the safe, connected adult. Like, I'm not that little kid. And also, I need to learn how to love that little kid. So if you picture it like a car, if my soul is a car, um, in sexual temptation, if I give in, it's like I'm handing that inner child the steering wheel to the car and letting him drive, and he's going to crash the car, inevitably. But if I never really deal with my childhood, it's almost like I'm locking that kid in the trunk. And when I do that, he's going to retaliate. He's going to figure out a way to survive. So instead of letting him take the wheel and crash the car or trying to lock him in the trunk, it's more about inviting him into the passenger seat or perhaps a car seat so that I can have a relationship with this part of me. It's also not driving the car. And then meeting those needs for acceptance that I mentioned, for connection, for safety, removing shame. I mean, when we process these things, the results are incredible.
Staying on this inner child work, I think a lot of Christian men, believers, people within the church, when they hear inner child, they think new age, flaky, spiritual type of approaches. How do you, Drew? Because I know you're a faith-based man, and your approaches are rooted in scripture and biblically grounded. How do you reconcile this inner work with this perception that it's kind of new age with what scripture is going to point to?
We can look at it in terms of the Bible and in terms of brain science. So in terms of the Bible, I would point you to Psalm 131, where the psalmist writes, "I have stilled and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother." And he often talks about all that is within me, my soul. Like, there are many parts within our souls: emotions, sexual thoughts and feelings, and memories. And so when we get into brain science, the inner child is really an oversimplified way of talking about memory, because our memories are not just in our heads, they're in our bodies, they're in our hearts. And there are times, in fact, a lot more than we even realize, when we will re-experience events from the past. It's called implicit memory or body memory. When somebody criticizes my work and I feel like my high school coach is yelling at me again, or somebody doesn't text me back and I feel like my middle school friends are rejecting me again. My wife is not happy about something and all of a sudden I feel like I'm talking to my mom. Like, that is a re-experienced event also known as implicit memory. And that's when the inner child or the inner teenager is going to get activated. So, biblically speaking, we're learning how to do what Psalm 131 says. And then scientifically speaking, we're learning how to process our memories. So, one great piece of this for Christians is inviting Jesus himself into this work. It's not just my adult self doing the inner child work. It's often Jesus coming in and speaking the words that I needed to hear, and holding me, and just his presence is powerful.
Amen. Amen to that. I think you have a unique approach to healing, something that maybe you've kind of formalized and kind of made your own. Is it the OBC method or approach to inner child healing? Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I call it older brother coaching. For women, it would be older sister coaching. The idea is becoming the older brother or sister that you never had. I mean, how different would life have been if we had a loving, older, safe, connected person who was guiding us through sexuality? For so many of us, it was like, was never talked about, or we got one sex talk that was all about what not to do. We didn't get this intimate apprenticeship. And so this approach is essentially saying, like, hey, it's not too late to grow up sexually, emotionally, and the best person to help you do that is your adult self. Um, of course, we include Jesus in that. We include other people in that. But there are 3 steps to this coaching process. And before I say what they are, you don't necessarily need a coach to do it. You are the coach working with your inner child. And of course, it can help to have a professional, or it can help to have someone who's trained in these things. But these are the 3 steps. Number 1, locate the boy. Number 2, love the boy. And number 3, lead the boy. So locate the boy means figuring out when I'm triggered and I feel the urge to watch porn, what's happening within me? Where is this coming from? Is this coming from the teenage Drew, or the school age Drew, or maybe even infant Drew? Like, what's happening within me? We locate the boy, and then step 2 is so critical, to just love this part of me exactly as it is. I'm not going to try to shut it down. I'm not going to try to make it go away. And this is really hard for a lot of guys. When you think about, how do you feel towards yourself as a boy? And if you look at a picture of yourself from when you were younger, how do you feel toward that kid? I mean, it's often visceral to feel like, oh, I'm ashamed of that kid. I don't even want to look at him. There could be disgust. There could be anger of like, I hate what he did. Especially if you have shame about the things that maybe you did to other kids. So learning to set that aside and just love him exactly as he is. That's what we truly need. And then the 3rd step is lead the boy, which is then, after connecting, which we've talked about is so important, then directing and saying, hey, there's a better way than porn. Let me show you what that is. Let's go call a friend. Let's go for a walk or a run. Let's go work out. Let's go to our identity statements. Let's do something that's really life-giving and that's going to meet the deeper desires.
I'm loving all this. It's just challenging me in so many ways. I'm like, Frank, you got to kind of like formalize some of the things. We have a framework in our program, and it takes place, I think it's in week 2 or 3, right there in the beginning of a 12-week transformational process. It's right in line with this. I haven't, called it the OBC method, but it's like, think of that conversation you needed to have before you saw porn. So going back to that younger boy, maybe he was 6, maybe he was 8, maybe he was 12. What conversation needed to take place before you saw it? Who did it need to come from, right? Did your dad need to sit down and say, hey, there's going to come a point, Drew, in your life where your eyes see something your brain isn't ready to handle? How would they have made you feel through that conversation, so that when you saw it, you didn't feel the guilt and shame And then how do you become that person now? And that's kind of for a couple different reasons. A, because you need to heal that young boy. We will use that very similar language, but you also want that guy around right now when that voice creeps back up as you're going down this journey. And maybe, just maybe, that guy is going to need to show up for somebody else in the future. Maybe it's going to be your own son. Maybe it's going to be a guy that you lead down this journey later on in the future. So I told you, man, there's going to be a lot of commonalities and similarities in what we do here. But I love the language and the frameworks that you're putting together here.
Thanks. Yeah, no condemnation. This is not an excuse. It is an explanation to see the story behind our sexual patterns. And then, like, I really believe that underneath every behavior, there's a feeling. And underneath every feeling, there's a need. And that comes from Ashley Warner, a parenting expert, but I think it applies to everybody. It applies to this. So when we meet those needs, we deal with the cause, not the symptom.
You work with predominantly Christian man guys that have maybe been brought up in a purity culture. Maybe they've been shamed. Maybe they never felt safe to go to talk to anybody. How have you seen purity culture specifically set men up to struggle?
Yeah. I see 5 problems with purity culture that do set men up to struggle sexually. Toxic shame, repression, like repressed sexuality, the military mindset, cultures of control, and false promises. So we've already talked about shame. Sexual repression is that instinct to attack or avoid sexual thoughts and feelings, which is what I thought I had to do growing up in the church and growing to Christian schools. It's like, if I'm feeling sexually tempted, I need to resist. But the problem is, the more we resist our sexual thoughts and feelings, the stronger they get. And it's a short-term solution. Long-term, it's not a solution. It's just a bigger problem. And so how do evangelical Christians typically try to enforce that repression? Well, it's through a military mindset of like, I have to wage war against myself. And I do think there is a place for spiritual warfare. And I do think there's a place for fighting for each other. But fighting against that little boy within me is never going to work. And it's not the mature adult Drew that has these urges and attractions. It's the little kid. It's the inner child. So we need to learn how to fight for him instead of fight against him. And then cultures of control, the typical porn accountability group is very rules based and it's often disconnected. Sometimes there are punishments. Sometimes there are like check-ins that end up leaving some people feeling superior and some people feeling inferior. It just feeds your pride or it feeds your shame depending on how you're doing this week. That's what I call a culture of control, where it's oftentimes just reenacting the environment we grew up in as kids. Purity culture is very rules based and it's very disconnected from your heart. It's just about what to do and not do. Whereas in a culture of connection, people are really interested in not just what you did, but what's going on underneath that. And where's that coming from? It's very emotionally sensitive. It's very vulnerable. And as men, that's tough sometimes to be vulnerable. And oftentimes we need somebody else to be vulnerable first so that we feel safe to be real and open up so that we can finally connect.
And then the 5th one, false promises. What would be some of the false promises that we believe?
Purity culture and the abstinence educators that came to my school taught me that if I don't have sex until I'm married, then sex will be so much more satisfying and I will have so much more pleasure. I mean, That's just not true. Maybe for some people, but I think it really sets a lot of people up for shame that uh, not only will sex in marriage be something that you have to work on and work through, um, there are also no guarantees in it. And a lot of guys think that getting married will solve their sexual issues, when actually it just makes it worse. So even if you succeed at the whole purity culture system, it'll still fail you in the end if you were hoping that marriage would take your problems away.
I'm glad you shared that myth or lie that so many younger men believe, that marriage is going to make it go away, where it's just going to become a magnifier glass. And then I think there's a brother to that lie that married men tell themselves, that they're using porn because their wife isn't satisfying their desires. Can you speak to specifically that one, right? A lot of guys are going to maybe hear this and they're like, Drew, I get what you're saying. You know, maybe that was the case for you, or maybe there's guys out there that do need this healing. For me, my wife just isn't putting out. So I need to get my needs met. And this is the only way that I can do it, because I don't believe in leaving her. I need to be here because I made that commitment. But she's the one that isn't filling my needs.
Yeah, that is unfortunately a very common attitude, and it's immature. Yeah,
Drew
it's
said it, not me. I'm kidding.
it's entitled,
Mm-hmm.
and it's also misguided. Um, like if you don't have an orgasm for months on end, you will actually be okay. You'll probably experience a lot of withdrawal symptoms. And part of maturity is learning how to truly feel those things and move through them and let them fuel you and move you forward. Addiction is about trying to not feel certain things. It's about being allergic to emotional pain and not being able to sit in it. So that can be visceral sexually when there's a lot of buildup or pressure. And thankfully, God has designed our brains and bodies to release sexual energy in many different ways that happen naturally, even without some kind of um, intentional seeking out of fantasy or stimulation. It can happen through your sleep. It can happen through your urine. It can even happen in the middle of a workout. Now we need to be careful about the way we talk about that, but ultimately, like you will be fine. If you don't eat food, you will die. If you don't have an orgasm, you will not die. It can feel like that, but this might be a good place to talk about urge surfing and some techniques to really get through intense, overwhelming urges.
Let's go there.
Cool. So, when I took my very first surfing lesson in Costa Rica, the instructor told me to work with the ocean instead of against it. I was like, what the heck does that mean? And the ocean is powerful and beautiful and extremely dangerous. Like it can destroy you. And also, it can be amazing and beautiful. So, our sexuality is like the ocean. And if you try to work against it, it's like swimming against the waves and they just keep pushing you back to shore, pushing you back to shore. And that's what was happening to me in my surfing lesson. I was so frustrated and exhausted because I was swimming directly against the waves, but the ocean is too powerful. Same with our sexuality. It is, God made it so powerful. It is beautiful. And without safety and the right conditions, it can destroy you. So, trying to swim against the waves of our sexual energy is fighting a losing battle. Learning how to move with the waves or dive under them as surfers do can help you get to where you want to go. And so the technique that I teach, that many people teach online, is called urge surfing, where you allow sexual energy to come, to rise, and say, there it is. I'm feeling the urge to watch porn right now. That's interesting. And if you stay with it, stay aware of it, eventually it will crest and it will pass. Sexual urges don't last longer than 30 minutes if you mindfully, non-judgmentally observe them. However, if you resist them or if you try to repress them, they can build and build like a snowball turning into an avalanche or a train that just goes faster and faster. And I've experienced that where I had an urge earlier in the day, tried to shut it down. Later that night, it's coming back with a vengeance. Or later in the week, if we don't process these things, they're just going to get bigger and bigger like a tidal wave. The way to move through the tidal wave is to maybe get underneath it and see what's below the surface here, and also to try to figure out, okay, what's the deeper desire, and how can I actually get that instead of just try to make it go away. Is this making sense?
100%. But I got to tell you, man, this is something new to me. I don't think the approach or the philosophy or what we're aiming at accomplishing is new. I think the term urge surfing is something that I've never come across before. But as we're discussing this, I'm kind of going through our framework here. I'm like, okay, like, well, if you're going to use the surfing analogy, it's like, I think it's important early on to understand and do kind of some auditing of where the urges are going to come from. So we'll help guys in the beginning phases, right? Okay, so there's going to be this kind of audit of your behavior, where the temptations and urges come from, so you can be prepared, right? I don't need to worry about going with the wave when I'm driving to the beach to go surfing. But once I'm stepping into the ocean with the surfboard, now I need to be prepared that when the wave comes, I need to surf with it as opposed to from it. So it's been my experience with a lot of guys that we work with is that porn urges come up in times of high stress, isolation, rejection. So knowing that you can be prepared, hey, there may be a point later on today, because I'm dealing with a lot of stress right now, that I may need to ride this wave of this sexual urge. So I think it's doing the early work for us to understand, okay, this is like kind of my audit board here of where my urges are going to come. And maybe once in a while you get blindsided by one, but if you lay the framework, like you're going to be in front of 90% of them, then what we'll take guys through very early on in our program is a long, extended fast. And I use that for a lot of different reasons. But one of them is I want them to feel that urge to go eat something, sit in it, because the same thing is going to happen. You're going to feel this initial wave to like want to go eat. A lot of it is behavioral. A lot of it is maybe your brain is just seeking an escape from something, because you can go 40 days without eating before you end up dying, sometimes longer. So it's not like you're eating because it's like you're in starvation mode. You're eating because you probably eat pretty consistently, because we live in an incredible world that has food readily available for us. So sit in it, feel it, watch it go away, because now you understand what that wave process is going to be like. Because I can tell you, like, the sexual urge or the desire to go look at porn is going to innately kind of in your body, but also in your mind, feel very similar of those first temptations to want to go eat if you go on a 48-hour fast. So once again, it's like the same kind of like framework and process. I love the language of like the surfing through it, like riding the wave. Don't try to like fight against it, which I think a lot of guys do. It comes up, I got to go do some push-ups. I got to go do a cold shower. I got to kind of journal. It's like, no, sit in there, man. Like, what's it trying to tell you? What's that journey of feeling it going to be like?
That is so good. I love that. And the audit is like scouting the beach and figuring out, okay, here's where that wave is probably going to break. Be prepared for that. And then practicing with fasting is just brilliant. The way that I would view that is kind of like learning how to stand up on the surfboard when you're just on the sand. It's like, before we get out there in the crazy chaos of the ocean, like, let's start just on the sand, practice getting up, see how that feels, and then when you go out there, you'll be more ready.
Yeah, because it's still going to be a little bit wobbly, right? Like the board will still be a little bit wobbly in the soft sand. I love this. I love this. Well, maybe pivoting a little bit now into like this journey through. I don't know if you use the language recovery. I try to shy away from it. Like we're on a journey to freedom. But a lot of guys, once they commit, right? Whether this is the 100th time or the first time, they're counting days, and then oops, they didn't surf the right way. They tried to go against it, and now they've quote unquote relapsed or slipped or made a bad choice, and they're like, fuck again. Now it's kind of this defeat, failure. I told you, Frank, you're never going to be able to come this. You're going to be broken your whole life. Here you go again, cycle of relapse, guilt, shame. You talk about relapse being feedback, not failure. What do you mean there, and how can we kind of shift our perspective on what a relapse ultimately is trying to teach us?
Well, a relapse may be a failure. It's not helpful to view it that way or to talk about it that way when I'm processing it, because that's just going to go right back into the cycle of shame. If I view the relapse as feedback, then I'm taking the posture of a learner. And man, relapse is the best teacher of all time. I hope I don't have to take too many classes from that teacher, but when I do, I've learned more from my relapses than any podcast, any book, any video course, any wise person. Um, and also they're the most painful lessons too. So relapse is an opportunity to learn, to heal, to grow. And sometimes guys will view it like falling down a cliff over and over. I prefer to view it more like taking a long road trip and veering off the side of the road into the ditch. Might need to do some repair work to deal with whatever damage you may have caused. But you don't go back to the beginning of the road trip. You come back to the place on the road where you left off, and then you keep going. And what you've gained, you have gained. It does not invalidate all previous growth, all previous healing. It just shows you the limit of how far you've come, and it gives you the best insight you're ever going to get for okay, what do I need to do next?
Yeah, that road trip analogy is very similar to, I think, the way that I've tried to describe it. And I think I initially picked this up from Dr. Trish Lee. And it was like, you're building a canoe, right? Like, I'm building a canoe without kind of a canoe building handbook. I know I'm going to need some wood. I'm going to need some hammers. I'm going to need some nails. It's going to look in this kind of like boat shaped form. But if I've never done it before, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm going to slap some wood together, then I'm going to throw it out in the water. Chances are it's probably going to have a leak, right? It may float a little bit, but if I really try to take it downstream, it's going to leak. And I think the process would be, okay, identify where the leak is, where's the hole in the canoe, let's go back to the shore. You don't break the boat down and try to rebuild the canoe completely. Like, no, I'm going to patch that hole up, I'm going to put it back out. So it's like every kind of lapse in judgment or poor choice, I think that's a healthier way to frame a relapse, as opposed to like this failure, which is consistent with what I think you said here, is just an opportunity for us to identify the hole that's kind of in our boat, and then we can continue to heal the frame, the foundation of the boat. But yeah, we're not going all the way back to like, now we got to cut a tree down again to get the wood. It's like, no, we already have all the wood and tools needed. Now we just need to kind of rebuild it and fill the holes back up.
Multiple guys have told me they went through a program where every time you relapse, you had to go back to the first lesson. Like, they made you retake all those lessons again every time. And that is not the way. Like, yes, we come back often to the same lessons over and over again at a deeper level, but I'm not who I used to be. I'm not who I could be. I'm not who I should be. And I'm also not where I was.
No man will step in the same river twice, for he is not the same man, and it is not a new river. So reminding, that's almost like you're telling the person you haven't had any progress or growth at all. Like, it's so defeating to confidence.
And to be fair, for a wife, for a sexually betrayed partner, it can feel like going back to square one, and we need to be patient, gentle, and empathetic with them in that experience. Externally, I can be with my wife if she feels like everything's destroyed and we're back to square one. But internally, I'm going to hold on to all of the growth and victory that that is still there.
Yeah. Speaking about wives and relationships, how does this entire kind of framework and approach that we've been talking about here, healing the boy, the inner child, how at all does it help in a wounded marriage? Is there something that we need to add in top of this? Because I'm sure you see it a lot with married men. They come in obviously defeated, beat up. They need some healing, but their actual relationship and marriage needs some restoration as well. So how can this kind of approach help a guy in communicating with his wife, or is there something that he needs to layer on top of that to ensure that the marriage is getting the proper attention and healing that it's needed?
The Outgrow Porn approach is primarily focused on individual healing, individual freedom for the guy who is struggling with sexual behavior. That's 1/3 of what needs to happen for a marriage to be saved. Often, wives get neglected, and while the husband is getting resources, community, professional support, she's not getting any of that. She might not even think she needs that. But this creates a bigger gap in the relationship. So it's extremely important to try to equalize that, because there are communities and there are professionals who specialize in helping women with these issues. And there are also male betrayed partners too. I mean, a lot of guys have had their wives cheat on them. So sexual betrayal is real, it's traumatic, and just like you get help for addiction, you got to get help with the other side of it too. And then so there's individual healing for the husband, individual healing for the wife, and also reintegration for a couple. And that is another huge issue, because this is not generic marriage counseling. This is a crisis. Um, and so, like, somebody who just has a generic marriage and family therapy practice might not actually be equipped to deal with the relationship crisis that often requires like a full disclosure, a structured way of restoring truth and safety in a relationship. So those are the three parts. You can think about it as a triangle: individual for both people, and then for the couple too.
No, and that's exactly the way that I would break it down. I'm curious with you, and I think husband material. Do you have in-house resources for the wife and couples, or do you have kind of places that you try to point and direct them to that maybe you've at least kind of like filtered through and kind of say, hey, that's a resource I can put my name kind of behind?
Yeah, we have a document with resources for partners. There's some great organizations out there. And APSATS is a really big one you should be aware of. The Association of Partners of Sex Addicts Trauma Specialists. It's a mouthful, but like, yeah, we specialize just in men at Husband Material.
Yeah. Same here, but we filtered some resources, and we have kind of like some very small type of trainings that they get when they, get access to our entire content curriculum. And then through there's some contact resources that they can get in touch with people that we've kind of filter through. And once again, feel confident putting our name behind. But I've talked about it exactly the same way, right? It's like, because our approach, I wrap it up and I say it's growth centric. For some guys, it's going to be this deep dive into personal development, healing work. Sometimes they've done a lot of that work, but sometimes this is like their first journey into that. And I think once you catch that bug, like, it becomes a new way of life and a new way of living. And Carol Dweck talks about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. If you're in a relationship where one person is growing, which I would say rebuilding yourself, healing is a journey of growth, and the other person is staying fixed, eventually you're going to end up here where it's like one person is at kind of a new, a new frequency, a new spectrum, a kind of new wave of consciousness, which now, like, the relationship is not going to be able to have any type of connection. So I've always encouraged women to say, hey, get in something where you're not only healing, but now you're growing at the same rate that your husband is.
Yes. And also, to be really compassionate for what they are going through. If we picture the experience of finding out that my husband has had a secret relationship with porn for our whole marriage, it's kind of like getting hit by a bus. And oftentimes these wives who get hit by a bus um, are now on the side of the road, like bleeding, um, and then they're expected to take care of the bus driver. It's like, no, the bus driver is getting all this emergency help, like, and it's like, well, we can't blame the woman on the side of the road for where she's at. I mean, um, and it's not on her to try to make sure the bus driver's okay so he doesn't crash again.
Agreed. Drew, man, I've loved this. Guys, as I talked about in the beginning, in the intro, this is Drew's second time on the podcast. If we go back, way back in the beginning, Yum Dung and Curious Frank episode 22, February of 2020, we had Drew on. Helping Men of God Quit Porn. We'll link that down there below. And very recently, we had Drew featured on the Rebuilt Man, a Coach's Corner episode. We talked about, some of his frameworks, some commonalities here, but I think we really unpacked a lot of different things here in this conversation. But one thing I want to kind of end on here is this new book. Obviously, we've been talking about outgrowing porn, your frameworks, the healing of the inner child, all the work, and all the great things that you put in the book. We'll have a link down there below for the guys that want to pick up a copy. If you're hearing this on episode release day, the book is out as of now. But Drew, man, you're running a successful coaching organization, ministry. You're running events, doing, I'm sure, high level coaching, doing group-based coaching. What called you, or what did you feel called to kind of like put your expertise into a book? Because I know the undertaking of a project like that isn't something that is small. So why'd you feel called to write this book?
Man, this is the book I wish I could have given to my clients. I wanted something that would be easier to read, practical, with lots of tools and lots of stories of victory and healing, not just stories of what got people into this mess. And to have it all in one place, because there are so many different angles on this, and I know there's even more than what I've put in the book, but to make it easier than ever to find lasting freedom is what I wish I would have had when I started this journey.
And what do you hope readers, in addition to healing and freedom, what do you want the guys that pick it up to get from it?
I want you to have less shame, more compassion for yourself, less despair, more hope, and ultimately, like for you to be able to grow up in whatever places you've been stuck. Yeah.
I love that.
As we've said, for the most part, boys and girls get hooked on porn. On the flip side, boys don't outgrow porn, men do. So I love something that I saw on your website about how you don't treat the addiction, you coach the man, and become a man who no longer needs it.
It's the only way I believe freedom is truly possible, to become the man that no longer wants, needs, or desires it in his life. You can tell you how many times I get asked the question, Frank, how do I quit porn? Become the guy that no longer wants it. I mean, in a simplified, one simple answer, right? Become the guy that no longer wants it. Now there's going to be a journey to that. And, I think what we've talked about here today is an approach that is very effective, rooted in safety and connection, biblically grounded. We'll come at it through, what some people see as more of aggressive lens. But once again, I think one thing I talked about on your episode, your podcast recently, was like, that's just who I am. God gave me this energy, personality. Maybe he also gave me access to a lot of coffee. I don't know. But if you peel it all apart, man, like we're saying almost exactly the same thing. And that's why, Drew, I'm so grateful that we connected so many years ago and had a chance to stay in touch. And, I've watched from a distance the things that you've done. And I'm glad we reconnected here recently. And I'm looking forward to hopefully doing more things, man, because I can hear it in your heart and in your soul, the love and passion that you have to really help, man. And like I told you, the feedback we had from the Coach's Corner episode blew me away, which is why I'm excited to get you back on here for a little bit deeper of a conversation. So, Drew, tell the audience and guys, if they want to go a little bit deeper with you, where to connect, where to learn more. Obviously, we'll have a link for the book down there. If there's anything exciting you got going on in the second half of this year where they can get plugged into something.
Yeah, you can go to outgrowporn.com to get the book. And husbandmaterial.com has everything else. Private community, retreats, coaching, and we do a free conference twice a year as well. So it's called The Porn Free Man. They might be interested in that as well.
I love it. Guys, we'll have all of those sites and links plugged down there in the show notes. Drew, here's a question kind of diverging a little bit. I probably asked you 5 years ago, but I've asked it, we're on episode 302. So I've asked it probably 290 times because I've done about maybe 12 solo episodes. But the title of our podcast is called The Superhuman Life. And I started this months after finding freedom in my own life. And it was really a curiosity-driven exploration of trying to understand what living superhuman meant to me. And that's what all these episodes are about. Selfishly, I want to continue to learn and grow. And when I get to connect with colleagues in the space, it brings so much awareness and understanding and growth into me. But as we wrap up today's conversation, as we always do, with the same question here, Drew, how would you define living a superhuman life?
Well, I hope that my answer makes sense. I think living a superhuman life is just living a fully human life. Like embracing the full range of human emotions, feelings, even sexual feelings, allowing them to exist, not being dominated by them, and learning to process them. Man, that's fully human. When we don't, when we leave our feelings unprocessed, then our feelings have us. So I love the ability to be able to be aware of what I'm feeling, to process it, and it doesn't have to take me back to porn.
Love that. And it makes all the sense in the world. I think specifically in the guys that will resonate with today's conversations is they try to shut off, blunt, run from, numb, escape half of that full spectrum of emotions. And for me, one thing I noticed when I got on the other side of it and I began to walk in freedom is the highs became so much higher, but I was able to experience the lows. They didn't go away, but I began to understand the relationship that those two played together in creating the fullness of this experience that we're on. Because I'd suppressed so much of the bad, by trying to escape it, that it really blunted my ability to experience the joy, peace, and love that the other half is meant to really provide. So,
and that is following Jesus. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross. He went through the lowest lows to give us the highest joys. And so in this journey, we are joining Jesus in death and resurrection.
Amen, brother. Guys, Drew Boa, Husband Material, Outgrow Porn, linked all down there in the show notes below. I hope you guys got value. I hope you continue to rate, review, share these episodes. This one in particular, though, we talk about connection and community and lifting our brothers up. So many of you are going to resonate with all the things that we shared. I'm excited to have conversations with a lot of you guys out there. But if you know that there's somebody, in one of your communities, or a brother from church, or somebody you've had conversations with that is struggling with some of these things, the guilt, the shame, the sexual suppression, the not being able to understand what this path to freedom ultimately looks like, do us a favor, but do that brother the blessing by sharing this episode and conversation with them. We love you as always, guys. For Drew Boa, your host, Coach Frank Rich here, episode 302. Look forward to seeing you guys for many, many more. God bless you guys. We love you. See you in the next one.